welcome back to another episode. I am so excited to have you all joining today. And today is such a special episode. If you're listening to the podcast version of Confidence and Creativity, this is actually our final podcast for season 1. So thank you all so much for listening to our first season as a podcast. It has been an amazing journey, definitely a stretch for my own confidence and creativity, but we've had 8 episodes in this season. So if you've missed any of the previous ones, definitely go back and listen. And if you want to watch the YouTube versions, you can do that. And we are Mission Key TV on YouTube. So I'm so excited today for this episode because I wanted to close the first season with something that we haven't done yet, and that is to do kind of a group chat conversation about a really pressing topic, trending topic. And so I am so excited to have 3 amazing women joining me today. And they are personal friends of mine. I have known them individually for years and had the wonderful opportunity last year to bring them together. And we are now connected and have been just encouraging each other and just connecting on so many different things. And so I wanted to bring them together to talk about the topic of imposter syndrome. And it's funny because I thought about doing this early last year, but I figured, imposter syndrome, it's just kind of this buzzword. It's going to come in, go out, and maybe it really won't be relevant in 2021. Well, 2021 is here, and I have seen multiple resources multiple times a month talking about imposter syndrome. It is very real. It is still here. People are still talking about it. So wanted to get these ladies' perspective because they are amazing in their fields, in their career, their family, their business, all different aspects of life. And so I just thought they could bring some very insightful perspectives to this topic. So without further ado, I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves. I'm just going to shout them out as I see them on my screen. So I am going to start with Keisha.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Samantha. My name is LeKeisha Maldon, and I am a cloud delivery associate manager for a very large management consultant firm in the area. I've been there for 2 years now, and I was at my previous organization for 15 years doing very similar work. Something that makes me feel confident is actually just having on a really cute outfit. It's something about just having my lipstick popping, or, the pixie is just like hitting the right angle for the day. No matter what's going on, I just feel like really, really good. So I could be having the worst day ever and look in the mirror like, girl, that lipstick and that outfit is working, and I just feel like I could take on the world. So I'm really excited to be here with you ladies to just engage in this conversation and see what we got next.
Yes, excellent. Thank you so much, Keisha. I'm so glad to have you. And next we have Cherise.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me, Samantha. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, everyone. I'm Cherice Hopkins. I am a human rights attorney and advocate and have been doing this work for the past 5 years. And previously, I was doing something completely different and working in the private sector for a Fortune 50 company. And same thing, like getting cute, getting dressed up, especially I believe hair is an accessory. So when that accessory is right, I feel super confident.
Excellent. And last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Amy Cole Smith. I don't know if she has her PhD yet, guys, but she's getting one. So I just have been calling her Dr. Smith for a very long time. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Samantha. So we're looking at like May-ish for that to happen.
Yes.
But anyway, my name is Amy Cole Smith. I work in DC. I'm a policy and advocacy employee for higher education. I've been doing that work for almost 3 years. Most of my work is advocating on behalf of our HBCUs and our other MSIs. So I would say what makes me feel confident and creative, just like Cherice and Keisha said, a good outfit, especially if I have to go on the hill, if I have a real nasty heel on, there's nothing you can tell me. Absolutely nothing.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. I'm so excited to have you all join and talk about this topic. So I want to start us off with just setting the stage and setting an official, or as close to official as I can get, definition of imposter syndrome. So I was reading in the Harvard Business Review, and their definition, they say that imposter syndrome is loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. It disproportionately affects high achieving people who find it difficult to accept their accomplishments. Many question whether they're deserving of accolades. Psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Susan Imes developed the concept originally called Imposter Phenomenon. And this was back in 1978 in their study that focused on high achieving women. They posited that despite outstanding achievements and professional accomplishments, women who experience the imposter phenomenon persist in believing that they really are not bright and have fooled anyone who thinks otherwise. Wow. So that's a lot just to get started. And I actually, before reading this article, didn't know that term had been around since 1978, right? So I guess what do you all think about that definition? And whoever wants to answer first can. When did you first learn about imposter syndrome, and what has been your first experience with it?
So I learned about imposter syndrome probably about 5 years ago, and I mean, the definition that they say is definitely correct. But I would say, like, through my reading more into it, you have a lot of people who are coming out now saying that imposter syndrome does not even exist. It's more of kind of a mental thing.
Yeah.
But my rebuttal to that is you cannot take away from someone's lived experience. You can't sit there and tell them you don't have imposter syndrome, it's something else. To me, you can relate that to someone saying they're going through and they want to see a counselor, but your response is no, just pray about it. So you can never take away from somebody's lived experience. So I would say with imposter syndrome, me personally, what I have dealt with on just my own personal journey, because the field I work in is, majority men and majority white men at that. So when I'm in the room, anytime those feelings come up, I have to check myself. And I also have to ask myself, who am I doing this for? So I think of the brown and black, college students who are behind me who want me to advocate for them at the table. And I can't walk or sit at the table if I have something in my mind that's saying that I'm not good enough, because I think that will project onto what I'm trying to convey. So I also do it for my son, because if he decides to go to college, he needs to know that you can walk at the room, you earned your seat at the table, and more than likely you should have the biggest chair at the table because you probably know more than them anyway.
Wow, that's good.
I would just hop right in and absolutely agree with everything that Dr. Amy said.
We're just gonna call her that for the show, guys. We hope she doesn't mind. We're just claiming that. It's only a couple more months to go. Yes, you already got it. So go ahead.
Yes. Very similar to you, Samantha. I was surprised just in my research and reading that this term has been around since the 70s. I think my first encounter with it was probably a few years ago, when just talking with other people, they were able to actually put a name on what I had been experiencing that I thought were just nerves or, not feeling good enough. I was never really able to put a term around it. I just thought, like you said, as a very high achieving person, a perfectionist, I just always felt like, man, am I doing enough? I work in the IT field. So again, I'm always in the room it's a very male dominated population. We see here more now that shift is kind of changing, just with more of the push for women in STEM and technology. But it really kind of made me feel good on one hand that I wasn't alone, because other people were like, hey, I have this same, feeling. And then being able to identify what it was, I think helped me to get a grasp on it.
Yeah.
I totally agree with what Amy mentioned, that, when you throw terms around, if it's not your lived experience, it's very easy to dismiss. But I think now that we're having more conversations about it, I'm glad, because I think it's freeing people and it's allowing us to kind of really talk it out and get to the root of, where did this start? This is not a new term that just started in 2020. This has been going on since the 70s. And I thought it was very interesting that her study was specifically around women.
Yeah.
So it just goes into, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, why we may feel like we don't deserve, a seat at the table, that we don't deserve our position. So I'm actually glad that it's now being brought more to the light, and that we have these spaces to talk about it. And having kind of a background also in counseling, I think the next step is to, even though you're able to identify what it is, to not use it as a crutch. I think that's probably the next place that we need to go, because it's easy to just say, well, I have imposter syndrome, but once you know you have it, what are you going to do about it? So I'm glad to, be having this conversation with you all, and, bringing light to conversations that are not always easy to have, because we have to feel like we're strong, and, it's okay. And no, it's not always like that. When you're sitting in the room with, five men talking about migrating servers over to, the next form of cloud, and they're looking at you like, girl, what are you doing here? And I'm thinking to myself, well, do I deserve to be here? And it's like, no, Keisha, you do this deserve a seat at this table. So I would just say I agree with the definition. I think it is a real thing, and I think it's important to have these conversations about the topic.
I so agree. And I definitely resonate with the power of having language to be able to name and speak to these things. I only recently heard the term, I won't say recent, but within the past few years, heard the term imposter syndrome. But I could definitely say experienced it before that. And so I think there's such power to be able to have the language to say, this is what I'm experiencing. And then to Keisha's point, then like after you've been able to name this thing, then that equips you to be able to tackle it. Because how do you tackle something when you don't even understand what it is that you're going through? And I didn't realize that, the study, took place in the 70s, that people were talking about since then.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, right? I think whenever we think about like the women's liberation movement, the civil rights movement, right? And how like those of us who were for so long historically excluded from different spaces started to be able to move into them, right? But like we weren't just excluded, there was a narrative that went through it that was saying that like we were excluded because we didn't belong there. And so I think it goes back to Dr. Amy's point about lived experiences, because whenever we deny people's lived experiences, it's just another form of erasure, so it's really important, I think, for us to not just talk about this in terms of our individual experiences, but like this broader context of like, okay, like maybe part of it is in our head or impacting our thinking, but that doesn't mean it's not disconnected from things happening externally.
Yeah. No, all great points. All great points. So where do we think this connection between imposter and women specifically came from? Because I'm thinking, I'm sure men and women have both had instances where maybe they didn't feel like they belonged somewhere in some space for some reason. But do you think that it is worse for women or more enhanced for women because of the way that our society is, and I'll say American society is? Or do you think that men could have it too, and just people aren't talking about it?
I think that men can have it too, but I believe it's probably more enhanced on the women's side of it. That's because, like if um, you look historically where a woman was placed.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was a woman's job to take care of the home, rear the children, and things like of that nature, while the man went out to work. But then when the role started to change, then it, the field, a lot of the fields were already male dominated. So then you have these women coming through, trying to shatter the glass ceiling. And if it's already male dominated, then they have already set their own culture. So then you have the women coming in trying to like make it a bit more equitable for them to be there. So that's why now you still have, certain organizations that don't have rooms for a woman to breastfeed. You have certain, organizations that, they still don't understand why a woman needs to be off so long for maternity leave. And, if you look at maternity leave in the US, that says it all right there. You look at things of that nature because, the women are considered the caregivers. So when it's more enhanced for a woman, we expect women to, kind of buck up and, just be okay. But at the same time, we still want them to rear the children at the same time. And as a mother, I will tell you, it's very hard to do both, because not only are you having imposter syndrome at work, sometimes you can have it with your own children, because you're asking yourself, am I spending enough time with my child? If I'm spending this much time with my child, then the question is, what am I not giving to work? And vice versa. So I believe it's more enhanced. And just also quick note, I'm prior military. So with that's very male dominated. And the field that I worked at in the military, I mean, you had this many women who were in my field of work, and, the culture within the military alone, with the jokes and things like that, they expect you to just suck it up because, this is the military. But I would always rebuttal and say, no, this is the male military. So you guys can have your culture right there. But let me tell you what you're not going to say to me. We're all serving in the United States Air Force, but there is no need for the disrespect. You can say it to her if she likes it, but you're not going to say it to me.
Snaps to that.
Yes, that was great. And I so agree, right? And it's not just the, still having places where there's no maternity leave policy or there's no rooms to breastfeed. It's also, right, like the things that we're told about that impact our thinking. It's like even before we're in a space, we're told like you're going to have to work twice as hard. You're going to have to stay later, and if it's the single person, then it's like, oh, you're single, you don't have kids. So then they expect you to really put in the time and the hours. And so I think it's also, that we are, not only are they like physically not making space for us, but then it's like we're also being taught these messages. And so we're internalizing them. So like, yeah, we're going to have like these high expectations for ourselves or question, whether or not we belong in spaces when we're told, that we literally have to do more to be deserving to be there. And then once we're there, we're going to have to do more to be able to keep it. Like it's interesting because there's almost like I do a lot of anti-violence work, and so you see the things about like the bystander support, but it's like you also see that like being coached on that in workplaces, like, oh, it's like be sure to help your colleague, because she might say something and it won't be heard, but the guy will say what she just said and it's heard. So like let's support each other and be like, oh yes, that was great when LeKeisha said it. And so it's like even in like the pushback, right? It's not incumbent on organizations or men, whoever it may be, to change their thinking, but it's like we have to adapt what we do to try to get them to value our opinion. So so I think it, men may experience it, but the reality is that men and women are socialized differently. And when it comes to a lot of spaces, it is, we're socialized in a way to doubt ourselves or to have to carry things and to center the needs of other people. And so it can make it, I think, very easy to fall into imposter syndrome, whatever space that may be that we're holding.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. I think the term imposter is very interesting because it kind of it forces you to think, okay, if you're the imposter, who is the real deal, right? So who do we think we're comparing ourselves to, or who do we think is the real deal?
Whew, that is a a weighty question. Something that Amy mentioned earlier that I thought was great. Imposter syndrome doesn't always just show up in the workplace. it could be in your inner circles as well. And I think sometimes that's where the comparison piece comes in. So
Yeah.
specifically for me, when I think about, okay, what is the real version or what I'm comparing myself to as a woman in technology, being in spaces where, one, like we just mentioned, I feel like I have to be a certain way because of expectations or narratives that have been created about me, women, Black women, So I tend to look at what I think it should be because I'm looking at the room around me thinking, well, if it is predominantly male, do I need to, change? I'm more of a compassionate person. I can be soft spoken. Those are qualities that I have that I like about myself. But if I'm in meetings with people that are not like me, it may make me feel like, well, this is what I see. So in order to continue on this path, I need to talk differently. I need to dress a certain way. If I like pink lipstick and, a black and white blazer, if I don't see that around me, do I need to change it? So really, I think it just depends on the person. It depends on the space that you're in. Even when I really love, like I said, what Amy said about imposter syndrome, even outside of the workplace, as a wife, as a mother, you may look at other people and look at how they live their lives and think, well, I don't deserve to be here.
Mhm.
I don't deserve to have, a child. I don't deserve to have a husband or a spouse. And it may cause you to, again, think things that are really not true, because you are comparing yourself to what you think the ideal is instead of really embracing who you are as a person. So I think that the comparison piece and the imposter syndrome kind of go hand in hand, but it really just depends on what it is that you're looking at. Because I may compare myself, for example, to Cherise and think, wow, we're sitting in the same room. I don't deserve to be here. Because I don't look like her, because I don't talk like her. And she may be looking at something totally different. So I really just think it depends on the space that you're in, what you have been taught, what you think is important, and again, the environments that you're in. I will say that my company has done a great job of creating more spaces for women in technology, and it is uncomfortable. I'll be honest, but we have to still push through in spite of it being uncomfortable for normal people, because the reality is we're going to be there. I love what Michelle Obama said: occupy the seat. So whether you like it or not, we're going to be sitting at the table, right?
Yeah.
We have to be confident in that space and know that even if we're doing it and we don't really feel comfortable there, still sit in that place and day by day, moment by moment, shift the narrative in your own mind and shift the narratives of those that are around us.
It's good. Really good. So, I know that you all have amazing career journeys, business journeys, ministry journeys. What is something that keeps you going in those moments when you do have that self-doubt? Have you felt like it's gotten easier as you have kind of moved up into different positions, gotten more years of experience, or do you still have kind of those same moments that you did, when you were younger? Just talk about that a little bit.
I think for me, it's actually gotten harder sometimes only because the responsibility is bigger, and the things that I'm aiming for are bigger, especially, I really experienced some imposter syndrome when I transitioned careers. So I think for me, like one of my triggers is like new experiences, because, I'm feeling like I have something to prove. And so I remember, for example, this time last year, I was at a meeting with people who are experts in the anti-trafficking space. And I had interacted with them before, hadn't really thought about it because I thought it was like as a representative of my organization. And then we had like the first in-person meeting I could attend. And through the conversation, I was like, oh no, these are people like here in their individual capacity as experts. And then my brain started freaking out, like, why am I at this table? You know, like when I thought I was just representing my org, that was one thing. When I was like, oh, everyone's like experts in their own rights, then like comparison started getting really big. And so I just had to remind myself, like similar to what LeKeisha just said, was like, I was invited to be here, you know, like I am wanted here, and that's for a reason. Like I am contributing to this conversation, you know, so like I had to check my own records and remind myself and speak truth back to myself. But I think that is something that as the opportunities have grown, along with the excitement, has also been for me the potential for imposter syndrome to kick in. And so I think it's like a muscle that I've had to exercise. So it's not so much that it doesn't happen, but getting to know myself better and having mechanisms in place so that I can more quickly combat it.
Yeah.
I would say for me, it's like a roller coaster. It goes up and down for me. So, and that it usually starts at the beginning if I'm starting like a new project or if I'm starting like a new gig, as Cherise was saying. But I will say at one organization specifically, it was a top-notch organization, and everybody there is an expert. Mind you, those quotation marks, an expert. So when they drew me in, I was like, oh, we're on a different playing field now. Everybody knows what they're talking about. So probably with like the first month, I'm just listening and I'm getting all this information that these experts are, spouting off. So probably after about a month, I realized these experts really don't know what they're talking about. So I'm sitting there, with, just a bit of imposter syndrome. At the same time, I'm like, these people really have no idea what they're talking about. Because a lot of the times, okay, just the background. So I have a history background. So when people say historical things, sometimes in my mind, I'll be like, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. So I found myself saying that a lot. And I'm like, Amy, you're questioning these people when, they graduated from, the Harvards and the MIT. But I'm like, that doesn't mean anything because they have no idea what they're talking about. So after about a month of being in that space, I started to speak up and say, well, actually. So when I get to the well, actually, not only am I going to give you a historical perspective, I'm going to give you some data as well.
Right.
To back it up. So then it got into, the looking at me like, well, who does she think she is? And when people started looking at me and, having an attitude with me, for some odd reason, that built my confidence because I knew that what I was talking about. So a lot of the times I feel that when we do have imposter syndrome, because, we're comparing ourselves to other people, more than likely, they probably have it too, because they've read your accolades. They hired you. They know what you can bring to the table. So a lot of times they will probably try to overexert themselves or, try to show how smart they are to compare to you, when in actuality, as I stated earlier, you probably deserve the biggest seat at the table, because although others are deemed as experts, more than likely you are actually the expert. And, when you bring that, truth to power and, literally tell yourself and believe in yourself and make sure you're like, I'm not crazy. This is actually what it is. It really changes like the perspective of how you come off, what you say. And I would say, in my current organization, that's how it is literally right now. Like we're not at work anymore, but I'll walk in the Zoom room and, I'll hear people say things and, old Amy would just sit there and be like, okay. And then, write a letter to my boss going, let me tell you why this is not true. But new Amy is like, well, actually, it's exactly what it is. And then I'm also asking, and it's not to down people, but I'm also asking, well, what is your experience with this? How do you know this? Where did you read this at? Have we brought these people in that you're talking about? So it's, like I said, it goes up and down. But when you get that confidence and you get that power within yourself, when you realize all those years of school were not in vain, it completely changes your entire perspective as well as the narrative. Because like I said, most of the time you literally are the expert in the room. You just have to literally dig into that power and believe it.
Yes. Yeah. No, that I think that is great because really, and this is something that I've been learning as well, is, expertise it's really relative, right? And just because somebody has done, especially in our culture, we have very specific things of, historically, certain names, certain brands, certain award conferences that people are associated with, certain professional organizations that people are associated with, and even, extracurricular organizations. It's kind of like if you're in these things, then you are considered, the real expert. And anybody who is not in XYZ category, organization, association, your opinion doesn't really count for much, right? But then now when we're looking at who made that, who decided that this group of people are the experts and these group of people are not. And so I really like, Amy, how you were saying in the beginning that you can't discount anybody's experience. And so as you develop those experiences, that is when your confidence grows, because you're saying, okay, no, based on what I've done here, here, and here, based on what I've seen here, here, and here, based on the work that I've done here, here, and here, this is what I can speak to. And this is reality for me. And so I can now come to the table with this. And just because it's different from your reality doesn't mean that I'm not an expert or that my perspective is not valid. And so I think it's really important. And just for anybody who's watching or listening who might even be wrestling with this, I definitely would like to encourage everyone that, we're all experts in something, and so whatever it is where our knowledge and our experiences have taken us, we're able to speak to those things. And just because we may not know something that, the majority of people that we're around have experienced, that doesn't mean that, oh, we have to take a back seat because we don't know what these people are talking about. So that's really something that I'm hoping is coming out in all of the, diversity, equity, inclusion buzzwords that are also coming into play now. I really hope that a tangible and actionable outcome of those conversations is helping people to feel valued and saying, you didn't have to graduate from Harvard or MIT or, XYZ in order to make yourself in order to be respected and in order for your perspective to be valued.
Yeah, I think that's great, Samantha. You hit on something, and that's something that has actually helped me. I think a lot of times, like you said, when we use the word expert, the imposter syndrome sometimes can kick in because we feel like we don't deserve to be in a place because, oh, I don't know enough about this, or I'm not as well versed in this particular topic. But we've all kind of said it. If they've invited you to the table, it's for a reason. So it's even sometimes getting past the fact that you feel like you need to be an expert and bringing your own opinion. People didn't become experts overnight. Like no one wakes up and just knows everything. So sometimes it's even getting past the fact that, oh, I don't deserve to be here because I don't know enough, but being confident enough to say, hey, I'm at the table. I may not know at this moment, but I have the ability to go and bring back and produce. I'm able to bring something new, to change the conversations, to bring a different perspective. And again, being in technology is constantly changing, right? Something that's hot today, 3 weeks from now, we may be talking about something totally different.
Right.
So for me, it was also getting past that point of, well, they're certified in this particular area and saying, hey, I'm not, but I can get the certification.
Right.
It's okay, and knowing that, again, getting past the narrative of, I don't want, for me, it also was interesting. I would think, I don't want people to think that I'm being prideful. So I would mask my imposter syndrome as humility. But really, I was feeling like, oh, well, I don't want them to know this. So I'll just be quiet because, I want us to be humble. And it's like, no, Keisha, you speaking your mind, you bringing your knowledge to the table, it doesn't change the fact that you're not a humble person. So we
Right.
sometimes even take things and we mix it and we change it because we don't want people to feel like Cherise was saying, the higher you go, the different levels that you get. People will look and say, well, how old are you? People have asked me that. How old are you?
That's so
Like,
real.
old enough to be here,
Right.
you know? So it's like I noticed that I started to change who I was because I didn't want people to think, oh, well, I don't want them to think that I think I'm better than them because I got this promotion. Or it's like, you didn't ask for this. You've worked hard and people have recognized what you bring to the table. And that doesn't change who you are as a person. So speaking your mind and feeling like you deserve to be at a place doesn't change the fact that you're not humble. So
Right.
that was like a huge aha moment for me, that I really was masking it as, oh, I just don't want people to think that I think I'm better than. And it's like, no, Keisha, you feel like you don't deserve to be here. And when I
Yeah.
was honest with myself about that, and I think it's also gotten easier because, like I mentioned earlier, having conversations with other people, senior VPs, senior managers, executives who experience the same thing. I'm like, well, hey, I'm not by myself,
Right.
It really brings some comfort to it. And it helps to, again, change the narratives because there are always going to be two narratives. There are going to be the one person who thinks they belong and the other ones who, feel like they don't. And you just have to decide which seat, you want to be in.
Yeah. That's good. That's really, really good. Really, really good. So I guess I would say too, Keisha, you brought up the point about confusing the, imposter with humility, right? So what does it look like to show up confidently without being arrogant?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start on that one just because it's something that I've been kind of dealing with.
Yeah.
For me, what it looks like is I acknowledge everyone in the room. I'm able to show up in my authentic self, right? So if that means that I am not sure about a topic, if I'm confused or I need clarity about something. So it's really just being myself, right? Humility just for me, it just means that I don't think I'm better than anyone else. Um, Arrogance is I walk in the room and I'm the expert on imposter syndrome. So everything that you all have to say really doesn't matter. So if for me, it's balancing compassion, just
Yeah.
compassion for people, right? Just we're all human beings. We all work hard but also just knowing in the back of my mind, I don't have to prove myself to anyone, right? So the perfectionist in me will always feel like I have to prove myself, I have to do this. So that's when the arrogance would come out, right? Because well, I need to let Amy know that I know more history than she does. So now we're going to, go back and forth. Or I have to let Cherise know that I read up on all these different law background, and it's like you get into this competition and it's like people are not even thinking about that stuff,
Yeah.
right? So it really just the humility for me is again the compassion for people, knowing that I'm no better than the VP. I'm no better than the person who cleans the bathroom, right? Because we all are human beings, right? I could lose my job today or tomorrow. My title doesn't define me, right? And I think that's what it is. People get caught up in the titles. So when you're caught up in the title, like when I started out as just an assistant or an analyst, it's a little bit different. But then when you start to move up to an associate manager, a senior manager, you feel like you have to change who you are because of a title. But
Mm,
at the end of the day, I'm still Keisha,
right.
right? So it's really just about the humility is feeling proud of my accomplishments, but remembering that I'm not the only person in the world, and that there are other people who have something to say. And I always think about how other people would feel. And I remind myself, I want to treat people the way I want to be treated, right? We say it all the time, but how does that look in our day-to-day like interactions, not just in the workplace, but anywhere. So it just boils down to having compassion for people and remembering that I'm not defined by my title. So if I'm not defined by my title, I have no need to be arrogant because I don't have anything to prove to anyone. I produce. My work speaks for itself.
Yes.
And I just do that and keep it moving.
That's excellent. I couldn't have said it better. Couldn't have said it better.
I think that also everything that, I mean, I totally agree with everything Keisha said, literally everything, every single thing, every single word. That also can be played into like if you're managing a team. So even though like you're the manager, the director, whoever you are, you have to remember there's people on your team who may know more than you.
That's good.
And that is totally fine. My grandma always says, if you walk into the room and you smartest one in there on everything, that's a problem because you should be constantly learning. So
Right.
the team of two that I currently manage, you know, one of my team members, she's been at our organization for almost 10 years. And she just got promoted to my team last year because people were looking at her as she's been here at this role for however long and then that's it. So I made it a point, I got to know her and I'm like, yo, this girl is brilliant. So any project that I'm on, I always bring her in, always, because I don't want people just to know my perspective on things. Like if we're talking about DEI, the current buzzwords right now,
Right.
We're talking about DEI. Okay, so we need to have diverse perspectives then. It's not just, well, what Amy said, it's right. Well, Amy said it's right, but guess what? Her team member also said this because they have a completely different lived experience than, and it probably, more than likely, it probably aligns more with the project. So, and then lastly, having that compassion, having that empathy, you give the same respect to the person who is cleaning the bathrooms that you give to the president. Yeah. I am not, Samantha, you know me, I am not moved by titles, nor have I ever been moved by titles. I don't care who you are. If I see you treat people like trash, you have lost all respect for me because it shows me how you got to where you are. And that's where I don't want to be. And just one last example, one job that I worked at, my assistant, she wanted to go to school during, lunch hours and maybe an hour of actual work to start her master's degree. The leadership was like, well, it's up to you. Since you're her supervisor, it's up to you to sign off on that paperwork. I want everybody to be great. Do what you got to do. Because if you don't want this job forever, I'm going to do what I can to help you move on. And I was like, okay, I have no problem with signing off on it. But what they said to me after that, it was, well, who's going to answer your phones? Me?
Wow.
Who else is going to? I was like, me? Well, what about answering emails? Me? Like, I know how to answer phones. I know how to, answer an email. I know how to use a printer. And it's like, what humbles me is that even from the very first job I ever had, which was McDonald's for 2 weeks, I still know the basics. I know exactly what I'm doing with or without the assistance of someone. And I have found that when people get higher and higher, those simple skill sets tend to go away. And it's like, well, it's not on my calendar. How do I put it on my calendar? How do you not know how to use Microsoft Outlook? Like, is it when you become whatever, like, is that a skill set that leaves? No, because guess what? Like Keisha said, I could lose my job tomorrow and end up being, someone's assistant. I can't walk in there without that skill set. I need to know how to do those things. So it's having compassion, having empathy, keeping your own self humble and realizing, not to get preachy on y'all, God put you in that position for a reason. The Lord giveth and the Lord will surely take away. Try him. That's all I'm saying. Try him. Try him the positive way. Try him the negative way.
Come on.
Try him and he will check you real quick.
I gotta say amen to that, sister.
We knew the Reverend Dr. Amy Cole Smith was going to come out. I tried to leave that title off, but you brought it up. So there you go. But this has been such an amazing conversation. I value each and every one of your perspectives and experience, and I really hope that this is encouraging to everyone who is watching and listening. So just as we close out, I would really love if each one of you ladies could just close with a bit of advice to a younger woman, a younger you, or even just someone who is really wrestling with that imposter syndrome and needs a boost of encouragement. What would you say to them?
I would just say to remember that you have value and the things that you're doing have value, and that, they in every space, in every capacity, and you already have things that you can share. Like there are people who are looking to you and you don't even realize it and you're having an impact. And to extent, there are areas you want to grow, like growth is great. Like it doesn't take away from what you're already doing, and that's just how we continue to go to our next path, next point on our journey. And it is a journey. So I would just say, like, you're already doing it, and just to take time to pause and just to just receive it, whether it's coming from other people or whether it's you, just thinking back and reflecting on the things that you've done yourself.
I agree with what Cherise said. What has helped me, write down what you've done, and that's beyond like the academics and like your position. Just literally write down what you've done, and realize that everything you've done has brought you to where you're at. The confidence that you had when you applied for that position, bring that same energy to the job. And realize that they hired you for a reason. And if they didn't hire you, they didn't hire you for a reason, but that means that there's always greater, always. So when you're in the room full of those people and you're feeling like, oh, they're smarter than me, they're not, I'm telling you, most of the time they are not. Bring your energy to the room. I'm all about observing first. If you want to go my route and observe first, totally fine. But bring your energy to the room, bring your knowledge to the room, bring your skill set, bring your lived experience to the room, because that may be the one thing that they're missing. And if you're sitting there saying, well, I'm not as smart, trust and believe, you're probably smarter. I'm telling you, I'm dead serious. And that's not even like a humble brag. More than likely, you are smarter than probably half the people in the room. So keep that energy, bring it, and just realize imposter syndrome is real, but there are so many ways for you to lessen that stigma that you have in your mind of yourself. You're smart, you're beautiful, you know what you're doing. And if you really need more confidence, just wear a really good heel and you'll be all right.
Yes, I love it. I totally agree. I would just add to that. Know that you're not alone. Know that you are not the only one who struggles, with these thoughts, with these limiting self beliefs. But also ask yourself, what's the consequence of believing them, right? What um, could you miss out on? What opportunities could you not see because you allow this kind of negative self talk to cripple you? Sometimes the fear, there is only one of you, right? So that boardroom, that meeting, that Zoom call, that conference call, they may never see you again. And you want to make sure that you leave your mark, no matter where you go. And kind of similar to what Amy was saying earlier, God has given us everything that we need, right? Even if we don't see it at that moment, where we're going, the positions that we're going to be in, it's all a constant. We're all always evolving, right? So where you are today is not where you're going to be tomorrow. And ask for help. I think a lot of times too, we get in these places, we've had these doubts, we feel alone, we feel afraid. Sometimes just reaching out to someone, finding an advocate, finding someone that can kind of help you through those moments could be really, really important. I know for me, in struggling with imposter syndrome, that has been one of the greatest things to kind of get me past that hump, which is just being honest enough to say, I'm on these calls sometimes, I'm in these meetings, and I don't always feel like I deserve to be there. And having someone tell me, no, you do, Keisha, like you do have value. We need each other, right? We're not meant to live this life, this work life on an island. And just know that, like we've all been saying, you have value, you deserve to be in these places, and sit at that table, occupy those spaces. And even if it feels uncomfortable, it's just like with new shoes, right? You first put them on, your toe might feel a little funny, but if they
Right.
cute, you're going to keep walking in them, right? Until you're going to keep walking in those shoes, and before you know it, it's like you have that heel on like it's nothing. So I would just encourage, that person who does struggle in it, again, to remember that they are not alone, that they do have value, and that the world, the workplace, whatever space that they're in, we need them, and to really just walk and own in that, even if it's one day at a time, because sometimes literally that's what it is.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, that is a great note to end on. Thank you, ladies, so much for taking your valuable time today to join for this final episode of our first podcast season. If you're watching this on YouTube, there are several other YouTube videos that you can watch from both this year and last year. So definitely take a listen to those if you have not already. Thank you all so much again. I hope that you all have enjoyed this season of confidence and creativity, and stay tuned when we will be back for the next season. Take care, everyone.